welcome, Laura. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Laura Scott is joining us today. She is an executive and leadership coach, as well as president of 180 Coaching. Her expertise is self-leadership, focusing on the areas of resiliency and self-regulation and equanimity, helping her clients stay calm, strategic, and creative during times of chaos and uncertainty. So we can certainly all relate to that right now and can use all the help we can get. So it's great to have you here today. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure.
So, right now during these times of uncertainty, fear, and a bit of chaos, I know over your years you've developed a lot of tips and tools to assist people in coping and dealing. And today we're going to focus specifically on, hot buttons and how do we handle it when people trigger those hot buttons, managing our reaction to that. So this is a good one. And especially with people feeling maybe right now, especially a little more anxious than normal, and therefore maybe a little more quick to anger or get frustrated. So, we all have hot buttons. And so how do we deal with it? What are they and how do we deal with it?
So I think the biggest thing we need to do right off the top is to figure out what our hot buttons are. Get some awareness around what our hot buttons and triggers are. And it's different for everybody. So the easiest way to figure out what your hot buttons are is to understand what your top values are. So if you really value honesty, you're going to be triggered by somebody who lies to you. And if you really value family and family connection, and your son hasn't returned your call in 2 weeks, you might be a little upset. So you want to recall a time when you got really angry by something somebody said or didn't say or didn't do. Which one of your values was not being honored at that time? If you ask yourself that question over time, you're going to figure out what your top values are. And then when somebody triggers you, you're just going to go, they just rubbed up against one of my values. So you're not going to take it like most conflict is not somebody getting up in the morning going, I'm going to piss Kristin off today. Most time conflict and these hot buttons are somebody clashing with your values, because your values may be different than theirs.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's good to remember, because sometimes I just think they're trying to bug me. So good to remember.
Your kids sometimes push your hot buttons just for fun, right. But normally strangers don't do that.
Right. No, and that's a good point. So when someone does, press one of my hot buttons and I start to feel that anger, how do I feel centered? How does someone slow down and not react, but stay centered through that?
Well, I'm going to share an example, a real life example of how you can do that from my own experience. So I was in my 30s. I had volunteered to be a mentor for Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And so I was mentoring a young at-risk girl who was currently living with her aunt because her mom was in jail. And I'm sure she was really embarrassed by that fact, because she was like only 13 years old. And one day I called her house and her aunt answered the phone and we started talking, and she said that her niece was still sleeping and she was really upset because she had gotten a D on an exam when she really should have gotten an A on it. And so later that day I picked my little sister up and I asked her how her exams had gone, and she smiled and she said, "Oh, great, I got an A on all of my exams." Well, of course I knew that she was lying. So one of my top values is honesty. So I was inclined to be upset with her. But instead, I just got curious and I asked myself, I wonder why she felt so necessary. It was so necessary to lie to me because she did well on the other exams. So I thought about that question for a moment, and then the answer just rang clear to me. And I just realized that she wanted me to love her and not to judge her. So at that moment, I just decided to let the lie go unchallenged, because it wasn't her wanting to deceive me. It was really coming from a place of her wanting me to love her. So there were a few more times that I caught her in a lie, but I just let it go. And you know, I was not there to judge her. And so she started telling me the real unvarnished truth after a while. It was not always pretty, but I think that's why we have the great relationship we have today, even now that she's a grown woman with her own kids. So when somebody pushes your hot button, instead of getting mad, just get curious, just ask what's going on with them. Put yourself in their shoes and just practice cognitive empathy, just asking, why are they behaving that way? What's going on here? Are two really good questions to ask to get into that empathetic framework.
So get curious, don't get mad, don't react.
Yeah, empathy is the go-to on this one. Because you can get mad, and when they see you getting mad, sometimes they're a little perplexed because they don't know what they've done, and they don't know that they've triggered something in you, because you might have been triggered because that person said something that somebody else said 20 years ago to you in a different circumstance where it was emotionally charged, and you remembered that, and you're projecting that this person's doing the same thing.
Right.
And that happens all the time.
Yeah. Makes sense. So then, when is it okay to get angry?
Of course, and there are times when anger really is legitimately the right response. And, if you've set a boundary with somebody and they've crossed it knowingly, yeah, a bit of anger is appropriate. I mean, if you made an agreement with someone and they did the opposite thing, and, that's appropriate to get a little angry. But as we said to, our kids, our young kids, use your language. Rather than scream or wail, just simply start your response with I, not you, I. So instead of yelling and saying, oh, you pissed me off, and just say, I'm really upset because you went ahead and bought that car when we agreed that we would make that decision together. Because two people really can't resolve an issue creatively when one party's in fear and the other one is angry, because the brain just doesn't allow us to be creative or smart when we're fearful or we're angry. It just can't happen.
Makes sense. So it is okay to sometimes express displeasure, maybe not true anger in terms of making someone fearful, but displeasure in certain circumstances. But really the message is slow down, reflect, be sure you understand, seek to understand, as the saying goes.
Yeah, I think it's important there are ways to express anger without violence or without causing anyone to be fearful. So you don't want to be physically expressive, and just monitor the body language, and just take a good deep breath and start with an I feel, or I'm feeling, or an I statement. So it's coming from your expression, and you're not accusing them or shaming them or putting them on the defensive. That's the last thing you want to do, is put somebody on the defensive, because they're just going to bunker in and resist. Right. And you're not going to have a productive conversation.
Right.
That's going to be corrective and instructive at that point.
Great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
You are so welcome. It's a pleasure.
All right. Have a great day.
And you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.